So we've covered the fact that Bill Gates is a cheater, that he's disloyal to his country, that he has contempt for the democratic process. What else is there to say? Oh yeah, he's entirely arrogant and self-absorbed. Hello everyone. I've got 3 topics I'm going to be talking about today. The first is Bill Gates is being praised as a hero by the Chinese media for his comments defending China's response to the coronavirus, as well as the World Health Organization. Secondly, I'm going to talk about a new Washington Post poll that shows that 67% of Hispanic Americans would like to see all immigration into the United States ended. Finally, I'm going to be talking about a USA Today article that discredits the groping allegations made by Tara Reade against Joe Biden. The only problem? All of the allegations are contradicted by a USA Today article written 2 years ago during the Justice Kavanaugh confirmation process by the exact same journalist. Recently, billionaire and Microsoft founder Bill Gates has been making the rounds around the TV networks. During his appearances, he's defended the nation of China, indicating China did nothing wrong with how it responded to coronavirus. Furthermore, he's also defended the actions of the World Health Organization, its impartiality, and he's criticized Donald Trump for vowing to end United States funding towards the WHO. As I've said before on this channel, China is not the United States' dad. Our government had the responsibility to be prepared in the event of a global pandemic, and the fact that they failed to do so, failed to stockpile the necessary supplies, and as a result had to forcibly shut down our economy, is ultimately on them. Don't let them get away with it by blaming this whole thing on the China. That being said, China is not blameless here. They lied about the disease, they covered things up. The virus originated there, likely due to carelessness on part of the Chinese government. Nor is the World Health Organization unworthy of criticism in this case. It's clearly revealed itself to be a puppet of China. It's repeated Chinese communist talking points. It's also been dishonest about the disease. And it's clear that it's playing politics when it comes to what should be a universal issue, which is public health. And it's not just Bill Gates defending China here. Presidential candidate Joe Biden said yesterday, if President Donald Trump cuts funding to the WHO, then he will restore that funding if he becomes president. So what's with all the shilling for China? There are some people in this world that are good and virtuous. They show loyalty to their country, their friends, and their family. They always do the right thing. And then there are people like Bill Gates. Bill Gates has always been a cheater. In developing the Microsoft operating system, he ripped off ideas from numerous other people. This is well documented in numerous documentaries, TV shows, and books about the founding of Microsoft. As CEO of Microsoft, Bill Gates continued to cheat. He flagrantly flouted US antitrust laws and turned Microsoft into a monopoly. Had Microsoft gone into business 10 years earlier, Bill Gates likely would have been criminally prosecuted and received a prison sentence. However, he was fortunate enough that his company rose to prominence after the Ronald Reagan presidency. You see, Ronald Reagan was an objectivist. For those of you who don't know what objectivism is, it's an extreme form of libertarianism promoted by the author Ayn Rand. According to Ayn Rand's books, which are fictional, not non-fictional, they're books with stories that Ayn Rand made up. But according to those books, if you are a capitalist business owner, you can basically do nothing wrong. Any sort of government regulation is evil. And you know it's evil because when you read Ayn Rand's books, the characters who aren't capitalists, who aren't libertarians, are evil people. The fact that Ayn Rand's conclusions all seem to be derived from pure ideology rather than any sort of pragmatic view based off economic data or testing, did not stop President Ronald Reagan from filling the federal government with people who bought into the legitimacy of objectivist philosophy. These objectivist government officials began to believe things like the United States no longer needed to enforce monopoly or antitrust laws because they were government regulations that would obviously make the market less efficient. Ignoring decades of government practice in economic research, the Department of Justice began putting on kid gloves. The last major antitrust lawsuit brought by the Department of Justice was brought against Microsoft for numerous instances of anti-competitive conduct. Like I said earlier, had this been before the Reagan administration, this would not have been a civil investigation, it would have been a criminal investigation. The Department of Justice had numerous incriminating statements by Bill Gates that indicated that he was well aware that he was in violation of criminal antitrust laws. He just simply did not care because Bill Gates, once again, is a cheater. As a result of the civil antitrust against Microsoft, it was ordered that the Microsoft Corporation be broken up. Of course, that did not happen because Bill Gates found numerous ways around it, once again by cheating. But Bill Gates isn't just a cheater, he's also shown tremendous disloyalty to the United States. Microsoft is well known as one of the first companies to offshore all of its customer service. Anyone who's ever tried to call customer support for Microsoft, whether it be for Windows or Xbox, has had the experience of being connected with someone who can't speak English, who can't help you with whatever problem you have, and who refuses to transfer you to anyone in the United States. Likewise, Microsoft pushed hard to have its products manufactured in countries like China. Upon leaving Microsoft, Bill Gates created one of the largest charitable foundations in the world, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The charity focused almost exclusively on assisting people outside of the United States, with one major exception. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded numerous think tanks and advocacy groups that advocated on behalf of the legalization of gay marriage in the United States. These groups, funded by the Bill Gates Foundation, first sought to seek legalization of gay marriage through the democratic process. They would fight to get ballot propositions so that the voters could vote whether to legalize gay marriage. The problem being, these ballot provisions always failed. Even in far left states like California, people were uninterested in legalizing gay marriage. So these legal groups sought a different strategy. They would go through an undemocratic process of getting Supreme Courts to argue that gay marriage was a constitutional right. Now, I implore you to go to the U.S. Constitution, read the text, and find out where in that Constitution does it say gay marriage is a constitutional right, because it doesn't mention marriage at all. But when you're as rich as someone like Bill Gates, you can make the unimaginable happen with money. So we've covered the fact that Bill Gates is a cheater, that he's disloyal to his country, that he has contempt for the democratic process. What else is there to say? Oh yeah, he's entirely arrogant and self-absorbed. Bill Gates had a reputation when he was CEO of Microsoft of being an absolute asshole of a manager. He would berate and humiliate his employees, often screaming at them during meetings. Bill Gates' arrogance and self-absorption is perfectly reflected in his defense of China and the World Health Organization. Bill Gates is unable to admit that he was wrong, that it was not a good idea to offshore all of the manufacturing in the United States to China. He's unwilling to admit that his support for internationalism and globalism was a bad idea, that international institutions like the WHO can easily be compromised and captured by communist countries like China. Bill Gates doesn't want to admit that. Bill Gates just wants to pretend that China does nothing wrong, because that's what leaves Bill Gates' legacy intact. If the consensus becomes that the Chinese government is evil, that it's totalitarian, then all of Bill Gates' vices come home to roost. The greed, the disloyalty, the willing to work with a communist government that oppresses people, those are all realities of Bill Gates' entire career, his entire life. Of course, now would be the perfect opportunity for conservatives who are opposed to China, opposed to the appalling course of conduct our country has been following, to rise up against this. What better time to call for an end to globalism, an end to mass immigration, than right now, during the coronavirus crisis? A crisis caused by globalism, a crisis that reveals, more than anything, the totalitarian nature of the Chinese government. Other than a watered-down immigration ban offered by Donald Trump, we've seen none of this from conservatives. They're too busy demanding that the economy reopen as soon as possible. They're too busy attacking state governors when what they should be attacking is globalism, is China, is offshoring, is immigration. So as day in and day out, so-called conservatives like Ben Shapiro demand that all of the wage cucks return to work and that we resume our level of consumption previous to this whole crisis, it looks more and more like the status quo is just going to continue. That after this coronavirus crisis, things are just going to go back to the way they were. All of the manufacturing offshored to China is just going to stay there. The United States is going to keep funding the WHO and all of these other international organizations. No attempt is going to be made to return manufacturing to the United States. We're going to keep trading with China and trusting everything that they tell us, because that's the impression that I'm getting from our leaders, both from the Democrats and the Republicans. No one seems to really want to learn anything from this crisis. They just want to pretend like it never happened. They want to have the same exact perspective that Bill Gates has. China did nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with our international institutions. This is not a reason to change any aspect of American society. We need to keep on going on with the globalized, homogenized world that we live in. Can you imagine if after World War II, the United States took the following position in regards to the Soviet Union? Look, guys, the Soviet Union, they were our ally during the war. Yeah, they're taking control over all of Eastern Europe, but that's okay. They just do things differently in the Soviet Union. They're just concerned because they got invaded by Nazi Germany. We look forward to trading with the Soviet Union in the future. The United States used to be a lion of a country, but people like Bill Gates have turned us into a sheep. Anyways, moving on to the next topic. A new poll by the Washington Post indicates a whopping 69% of Hispanic Americans want to see an end to all immigration. So to all the people who say that people who oppose immigration are just a bunch of racists, are you going to say that 2/3 of Hispanic Americans are racist? It reminds me of the time where Vaush debated illegal immigration, and after the person he debated with provided several legitimate reasons why someone would oppose illegal immigration, Vaush responded with something along the lines of, "It's okay, man, you can just admit you hate brown people." So Vaush, is it then true now that 69% of Hispanic Americans hate brown people? The people who are immigrating to the United States are looking to leave a third world country. They don't want to join a new one. These are people who still believe in the American dream, but when they get to America, they find out that the prospect of them ever owning a house is well out of reach because there's too many people here. How do we know that the United States is overcrowded? Well, we can tell by the price of goods that are contingent on the US population. So many things that you can buy, many manufactured goods, or consumables are not contingent on the population of the United States. These are things that could be sold anywhere in the world. This would include consumer goods like a TV or a couch or even an automobile. But there are certain consumer goods that you can buy that are contingent on the United States population. That includes houses. If you buy a house in the United States, the market price of that house is going to be based on how many other people there are who potentially want to buy that house. Another example is healthcare. There are limited amounts of hospital beds. So when you go to the hospital to get treated, the price reflects the number of people who also use those healthcare services, which of course is only going to be other Americans. Finally, you have the cost of higher education. There are limited spaces in US colleges, so the cost of tuition is tied to the number of people who want to go to that college. So what are the things that are out of control expensive in the United States? Well, it's going to be housing, it's going to be healthcare, and it's going to be education. The reason those things are so unaffordable is because we have too many people in relation to our economy. The reason the polls are going this way is that Hispanic Americans are waking up, that the proposal the left is offering them is a bad deal. Let's pretend I'm a leftist for a second. This is the pitch that I'm going to be giving Hispanic immigrants. Hello, immigrants. Before you start identifying yourself as Americans, hold on just a second. You can identify yourselves as an aggrieved minority group of people of color. You're in fact Hispanic Americans, and your group has been disrespected in US history. Now, if you identify with this group and band together, we can help you to get special privileges that the white majority in the United States does not have. In order for us to get you these privileges, though, you have to vote in leftists, and you have to support us continuing to bring more and more Hispanic immigrants into the country. We need these Hispanic immigrants because they ensure us electoral victories, and those electoral victories allow us to give you the special privileges. However, what the Hispanic immigrants are starting to realize is this whole leftist scheme is nothing but a Ponzi scheme. To the extent they can use the Civil Rights Act to gain special privileges over the whites, that produces diminishing returns the more and more Hispanic people come in. Increasingly, whites are headed towards minority status in the United States. Do you seriously still think you can extract special privileges over white people when they become the minority? Because if white people gain the ability to argue they're a disadvantaged minority group under the Civil Rights Act, then all those special privileges are going to go away. They're not going to exist anymore. It's going to be poof, they're gone. And then all of these new Hispanic immigrants that the left urged you to argue should come into the country, all of those people are going to be competing over you for jobs. They're going to be competing over the three things that I said are the most expensive in the United States: housing, healthcare, and education. Now, if you're a Hispanic immigrant, you wanted the American dream, right? You wanted your kids to go to college. You want them to own their own home. You want them to have healthcare they can afford. So why would you support bringing in more immigrants? Who's going to make that less and less of a possibility? Whatever short-term special privileges you get through affirmative action or whatever are going to be ephemeral in the long term. They're not going to last forever. It's a myth that the conservatives in this country, the ones that voted and supported for Donald Trump, hate Hispanic immigrants. They just want you to assimilate, start joining the conservative movement, and resist leftist efforts to use the Civil Rights Act to exploit and manipulate people. Because the way that the left in this country uses immigration policy in the Civil Rights Act is lazy, racist, and short-sighted. Finally, I wanted to talk about this USA Today article. Why I'm skeptical about Reade's sexual assault claim against Biden, written by an ex-prosecutor named Michael Stern. In this article, the author Michael J. Stern makes it clear that he believes Tara Reade is lying when she alleges that Joe Biden groped her back in the early 90s. He writes specifically, "But men and women alike should not be forced to blindly accept every allegation of sexual assault for fear of being labeled a misogynist or enabler." You get that, everyone? You shouldn't blindly accept people who allege that a sexual assault took place. Oh, wait a minute. Michael J. Stern wrote an article 2 years ago about the sexual assault allegations against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. What did he say about sexual assault allegations back then? "My default position is to believe women who say they have been sexually assaulted. Making an allegation of sexual assault is not the type of attention most women would want to needlessly bring to themselves." 2 years ago, you indicated your default position is to believe women. Why is it now all of a sudden that a Democrat is accused of sexual assault that now you're saying that we should not be forced to blindly accept every allegation of sexual assault? Seems real interesting how the tables have turned, hasn't it, Michael Stern? So why is it that Michael Stern believes Tara Reade is lying? Well, at the top of the list is the fact that Tara Reade delayed reporting the sexual assault. Reade waited 27 years to publicly report her allegation that Biden sexually assaulted her. Of course, first of all, we know that the statement isn't true. Tara Reade told numerous people about the sexual assault back when it happened. We know that Tara Reade's mother called into the Larry King show asking about a congressman who committed an assault such as this right after it happened. We also know that Tara Reade filed a complaint against Joe Biden with the Senate. But even assuming that this was true, isn't it interesting that Michael Stern wrote a second article back during the Justice Kavanaugh confirmation hearing entitled the following: "Do you really want to know why women wait so long to report sexual assault?" Article by Michael J. Stern. If you were to read this article, it provides numerous reasons why a woman who was sexual assaulted might not come forward with the allegation till years or even decades later. But I guess Michael J. Stern must have just changed his mind over the years. He must think differently on this issue now, right? Partisan politics and motivated reasoning couldn't possibly have anything to do with this change of attitude, right? Moving forward to the article about Tara Reade, there's some other interesting arguments he makes. One of the reasons he cites to that Tara Reade must be lying is that there has been no formal complaint produced. Of course, he omits the fact that the reason why there's been no formal complaint is that Joe Biden has had his Senate records sealed. So Tara Reade is unable to produce a copy of the complaint. Both her attorney and herself has requested that Joe Biden unseal these records so that she can produce the complaint. The only issue? Joe Biden refuses to do so. He doesn't want to be exposed as a groper. But if that were not enough, Michael J. Stern, someone who proudly proclaims his status as a former prosecutor, has the gall to accuse Tara Reade of working for Putin. This must be Russiagate 3.0, people. I guess Tara Reade is an asset of the Russian government. You see, back in 1991, when Russia was still run by a democratic government following the collapse of the Soviet Union, before Vladimir Putin had taken over any leadership role in the country, he must have predicted that Joe Biden would be running for president in 2020. So he recruited his aide, Tara Reade, back in 1991 so that she could make up this sexual assault allegation that could then be used to discredit the Joe Biden campaign 29 years in the future. That's just how much of a badass Vladimir Putin is. He can predict things that happen nearly 30 years in the future. I hate to break it to you, Michael J. Stern, but as much as you like to brag about how you're a prosecutor, The reality is, you were never a real prosecutor. You worked for the Department of Justice for several years where I'm sure you pushed a lot of paper, but I'm sure you didn't do very many jury trials, because that's not what the federal prosecutors do. Then you became a defense attorney because, let's face it, being a prosecutor was just like any other job to you. You didn't have any specific loyalty to what you were doing. You might as well just represent criminals if it pays you more. You apply the same approach that you did to your legal career to your journalism. You're willing to play both sides. Either women should always be believed by default, or we should not be forced to blindly accept every allegation of sexual assault. You're perfectly willing to take whatever position best represents the interest of your client, which for you is the Democratic Party, just like the rest of the mainstream media. Anyways, that's all I've got to say. If you enjoyed this video and you're not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe.